The guard stood frozen in the servants' corridor, his hand still on the door handle he wasn't supposed to touch. Inside the canvas bag at his feet were things that could end careers, end reputations. The Countess of Wessex stood 3 feet away, her face drained of color. She wasn't supposed to be here. Not at this hour. Not carrying that. The silence between them stretched like a wire about to snap. He'd been trained to see nothing, hear nothing, report everything. But what he just discovered wasn't in any protocol manual. This wasn't about security. This was about loyalty. And in the palace, loyalty to the wrong person could destroy you. He had seconds to decide. What do you do when you catch royalty breaking a rule you didn't know existed? Officer James Hartley had been with the Royal Guard for 6 years. He knew every corridor, every schedule, every face that belonged in the palace and every face that didn't. What he didn't know was why the Countess of Wessex was standing in a service hallway at 11:45 on a Tuesday night, holding a shopping bag from Waitrose. The moment stretched between them like glass about to shatter. Sophie's eyes met his. Not with anger. Not with the cold dismissal he'd seen from other royals when staff witnessed something inconvenient. Her expression was something else entirely. Fear, and beneath that, a desperate kind of pleading that made his chest tighten. If you're watching this story and you want more untold secrets from inside the palace, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't believe what happens next. James had been doing a routine security sweep, the kind he'd done 1,000 times. 3rd floor, west wing, checking doors that should be locked, windows that should be secured. Everything had been normal until he'd heard the soft click of heels on marble where no heels should be. He'd turned the corner and there she was. Sophie Wessex, the Queen's former daughter-in-law, wife of Prince Edward, wearing jeans and a dark coat. No security. No lady-in-waiting. No explanation for why she was in a part of the palace that royal family members never visited alone. The canvas bag in her hand was stuffed full. He could see the tops of containers, the corner of what looked like a handwritten card, the bright packaging of something that didn't belong in a palace pantry. Officer Hartley. Her voice was steady, but he heard the tremor underneath. She knew his name. That surprised him, ma'am. He stood at attention, his mind racing through protocol. What was the protocol for this? There wasn't one. She glanced down the corridor, then back at him. I need you to understand something. What you're seeing right now, it's not what you think. Okay. But James wasn't thinking anything yet. He was trained to observe and report, not to interpret, not to make assumptions. Yet every instinct he had was screaming that something was very wrong. I'm not doing anything improper, Sophie continued. Her hand tightened on the bag. I'm helping someone. Someone who needs help. Someone who can't ask for it. The Princess of Wales. He didn't know how he knew, but he knew. The whole palace had been whispering for weeks. Kate Middleton had been ill. The official statement said she was recovering well from surgery. But the staff knew better. They always did. They'd seen the doctors coming and going at odd hours. They'd heard the terse phone calls, the canceled appearances, the unusual requests from her household staff. And they'd noticed something else. The Queen consort, Camilla, had been visiting Kate's private apartments often. And after those visits, things changed. Meal trays came back untouched. Staff requests were denied. The warm, friendly atmosphere that usually surrounded the Princess of Wales had turned cold and controlled. Sophie took a step closer. I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to really think about your answer. Do you believe in doing what's right, or doing what you're told? It was a trap. It had to be. Everything in his training told him to report this immediately, to follow chain of command, to let his superiors sort out whatever royal drama was unfolding in front of him, but something in. Sophie's eyes stopped him. I believe in both. Ma'am, he said carefully, and when they're not the same thing? She wasn't testing him now. She was asking. Genuinely asking. James had joined the Royal Guard because he believed in service, in duty, in protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. He'd never imagined that the person who needed protecting might be a princess. From another royal? Ma'am, I think you need to tell me what's happening. Sophie's shoulders dropped slightly, as if she'd been holding her breath. Camilla has decided that Kate's recovery should be handled a certain way. A very specific, very controlled way. Kate's personal staff have been replaced with people loyal to the Queen Consort. Her meal plans, her medications, even her visitors are being monitored and approved. That's for her health. Surely, James said, though even as he spoke, he didn't quite believe it. That's what they're saying. Out. Sophie's voice dropped to barely a whisper. But Kate asked me for help 3 days ago. She managed to get a message out through one of the housekeepers. She's not being allowed the foods her doctor actually recommended. She can't see her children when she wants to. She can't even choose what books are brought to her room. The words hung in the air between them like accusations. This bag, Sophie lifted it slightly, has the supplements her nutritionist prescribed. The tea that helps her sleep. Letters from her children that somehow never made it to her room. A phone charger, because hers mysteriously stopped working. Things she should have. Things she's being denied. James felt something cold settle in his stomach. This wasn't just royal politics. This was control. This was someone in a vulnerable position being isolated. You are? He asked. Why not her husband? Her family? William doesn't know how bad it is. He's been told she needs rest and quiet, and he's trying to be supportive by staying away during the day. Kate doesn't want to worry him when he's already dealing with his father's health issues. Her own family has been told she's not up for visitors yet. Sophie's jaw tightened. And I'm doing this because someone has to. Because Kate helped me once when I needed it most. Because this is wrong. The guard and the Countess stood in that corridor, the weight of the moment pressing down on both of them. James had seconds to make a choice that would define not just his career, but his conscience. James looked down at the bag, then back at Sophie's face. Every rule he'd ever learned told him to walk away. To report this. To let the royals sort out their own complicated family dynamics, but he kept thinking about the Princess of Wales. He'd been on her security detail twice. Once at a children's hospital visit where she'd stayed 2 hours past schedule because one little girl wanted to show her every single drawing she'd made. Once at a veterans event where she'd sat on the floor in a designer, dressed to talk to a former soldier who couldn't stand for long. She'd noticed the guards that day. Actually noticed them. Brought them water during the long outdoor event. Learned their names. If I help you, James said slowly, and this goes wrong, I lose everything. My career, my pension, possibly my freedom, if they decide this is some kind of security breach. I know. Sophie didn't look away. And I can't protect you if it comes to that. I can't even protect myself. But I can tell you that if you walk away right now, you'll spend the rest of your life wondering if you could have helped someone who desperately needed it. It was the truth. He could feel it. Show me what's in the bag. Sophie's hand shook slightly as she opened it. Inside was exactly what she'd described. Vitamin D supplements with a prescription label bearing Kate's name. A tin of chamomile tea. 3 sealed envelopes in children's handwriting addressed to Mummy. Phone charger. A paperback novel with a bookmark halfway through. A small framed photo of her 3 children. Nothing dangerous. Nothing inappropriate. Just the small comforts of normal life that someone had decided Kate Middleton didn't deserve. How often have you been doing this? James asked. This is the 3rd time. The first time, I just brought some books she'd asked for. I thought maybe they'd been forgotten. Then I realized they were being intercepted. Her personal items are being screened by Camilla's staff before they reach her. And no one's questioned you. Not until tonight. I've been careful. Different times, different routes. But security's been tightened in the last few days. I think someone suspects. James made his decision. There's a service elevator at the end of this corridor. It goes directly to the family floor, but it's monitored. However, there's a 2-minute window during shift change when the camera feed loops. That happens in 8 minutes. Sophie's eyes widened. You're helping me. I'm helping her, James corrected. The princess. Not the politics. Not the family drama. Just a person who's being treated wrong. They moved quickly and quietly down the corridor. James checked his watch every few seconds. Timing would be everything. If they were caught, There would be no explanation that would save either of them. Why is Camilla doing this? James whispered as they waited by the elevator. What does she gain? Sophie's expression hardened. Control. Image. Camilla's always been sensitive about her position. Kate's popularity has always overshadowed hers. And now, with Kate vulnerable, unable to make public appearances, unable to defend herself, it's an opportunity. An opportunity for what? To reshape the narrative? To position herself as the steady, reliable one? The one who took charge during a crisis? And to remind Kate who really has power in this family. The elevator dinged softly. The doors opened. They had 2 minutes. They stepped inside, and James pressed the button for the 3rd floor. The family floor. Where the private apartments were. Where Kate had been essentially imprisoned for 3 weeks. Her security detail, James said. They're loyal to William, not Camilla. How are you getting past them? There's a connecting door between the guest suite and Kate's sitting room. It's supposed to be locked, but the housekeeper who contacted me on Kate's behalf leaves it open during her night rounds. I have exactly 15 minutes while she's on the 3rd floor east wing. The elevator rose smoothly. James could hear his own heartbeat. This was insane. He was facilitating unauthorized access to a senior royal's private apartment. He was ignoring security protocols. He was taking sides in a family conflict he barely understood. But he was also helping someone who needed help. That had to count for something. The doors opened onto a dimly lit hallway. Rich carpet absorbed their footsteps. The walls were covered in paintings that cost more than James would earn in a lifetime. This way, Sophie whispered. They moved like ghosts through the sleeping palace. Past closed doors and silent rooms. Past the life that tourists imagined and the reality that existed behind it. The guest suite door was unlocked, just as Sophie had said. Inside, the room was elegant and empty. Moonlight filtered through tall windows, casting silver shadows across antique furniture. Sophie crossed to a door on the far wall. She pressed her ear against it, listening. Then she tried the handle. Turned beyond was Kate's sitting room. The air smelled faintly of flowers and medicine. A small lamp burned on a side table. And in the doorway to the bedroom beyond stood the Princess of Wales. James's breath caught. The woman in front of him looked nothing like the polished, smiling figure from the photographs. Kate Middleton was thin.
Ow.
Too thin. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She wore simple pajamas and a robe. But her eyes were alert and desperately grateful. Sophie, she breathed. You came. Of course I came. Sophie moved forward, handing over the bag. I brought everything you asked for. Kate's hands trembled as she took it. She looked inside and her eyes filled with tears. The letters from the children? Oh God, I thought they'd forgotten about me. Never, Sophie said fiercely. They write every day. They are being kept from you. Kate pulled out the envelopes, holding them against her chest like they were made of gold. Then she noticed James standing in the doorway. Who? Officer Hartley, Sophie said quickly. He helped me get here. We can trust him. The princess and the guard locked eyes. James saw something in her expression that would haunt him. Not anger at his intrusion. Not fear of exposure. Just profound, aching loneliness. Thank you, Kate said quietly. You didn't have to do this, ma'am. Are you in danger? The question came out before James could stop it. Kate's laugh was bitter. Not the kind you're trained to protect against. No one's threatening me physically. They're just making sure I understand my place. Making sure I know that my recovery happens on their terms. That my image, my health, my children's access to me, all of it is controlled by someone else. William, James started. William is dealing with his father's cancer diagnosis. He's holding the family together. He trusts that I'm being well cared for. And I am, in a technical sense. I have doctors, nurses, meals delivered on schedule. What I don't have is agency, or privacy, or the right to make my own choices. Sophie's hand found Kate's shoulder. We're working on a plan. To get you more support, to let William know what's really happening. Camilla will destroy you if she finds out, Kate said. Her voice was flat, certain. Let her try. But James was thinking about something else. About the camera loop that was almost over. About the questions that would come if they were discovered. About the fact that they were standing in the apartment of one of the most famous women in the world, committing what could be called treason if you squinted at it the right way. "We need to leave," he said. Now, Kate grabbed Sophie's hand. "Next time, can you bring footsteps in the hallway outside?" Heavy, purposeful footsteps that James recognized instantly. Security patrol, and they were heading this way. James's training kicked in instantly. He grabbed Sophie's arm and pulled her toward the connecting door. Kate was already moving, stuffing the bag behind a cushion on her sofa with practiced speed. "Go," Kate whispered urgently. "If they find you here, lock this behind us," James hissed. "Pretend you're asleep." They slipped through the doorway. James heard the lock click, just as voices echoed from the main hallway. Male voices. Authoritative and questioning, Sophie stood, frozen in the guest suite, her face drained of color. They were trapped. The only exit led directly to where the security patrol was conducting their rounds. James's mind raced. The patrol was early. Someone must have noticed something. Maybe a camera he'd miscalculated. Maybe a pattern in Sophie's visits that finally triggered an alert. Maybe just bad timing. "The wardrobe," he breathed, pointing to an enormous antique armoire against the far wall. Now, they moved silently across the carpet. James opened the heavy wooden door, and they pressed themselves inside among hanging coats and the smell of cedar and lavender. He pulled the door closed just as he heard the guest suite door open. Light spilled across the floor. James could see it through the tiny gap in the wardrobe door. 2 beams from flashlights sweeping the room methodically. "Should be empty," a voice said. James recognized it. Officer Chen, a senior guard he'd trained with. But the thermal scanner picked up something. Sophie's hand found James's in the darkness. Her palm was slick with sweat. They barely breathed. "Probably just residual heat from the radiator," another voice suggested. "These old buildings hold warmth funny." "Maybe," Chen didn't sound convinced. "But we need to check." The Queen Consort's orders were specific. Any unusual activity on this floor gets reported directly to her. Not to the prince. To her, the footsteps moved closer. James could see Chen's shadow pass within feet of the wardrobe. His heart hammered so hard he was certain it would give them away. "Why is she so paranoid about this floor anyway?" the other guard asked. "Not our job to ask questions," Chen replied. But his tone suggested he had his own theories. "Just to observe and report. She's been very interested in the princess's recovery. Wants to make sure nothing interferes with the medical protocols. Seems excessive. Seems like palace politics. Which means we stay out of it and do our jobs." The flashlight beam swept past the wardrobe, paused, came back. James felt Sophie tense beside him. This was it. They were caught. His career was over. Possibly his freedom. And Sophie, God, what would they do to a member of the royal family who'd been caught sneaking contraband to another royal? The wardrobe door handle began to turn. Then Chen's radio crackled to life. "All units, report to the ground floor east entrance. We have an unauthorized vehicle in the courtyard." Repeat, unauthorized vehicle. The handle stopped moving. Chen swore softly. "You check the bedroom and bathroom. I'll handle this." His footsteps retreated quickly toward the door. The second guard moved toward the bedroom, his back to the wardrobe. James and Sophie had seconds. Maybe less. James pushed the wardrobe door open inch by careful inch. The hinges were old, whaled, silent. They slipped out like shadows. The guard was in the bedroom now, his flashlight scanning under the bed. James and Sophie crossed the sitting room in absolute silence. Each footstep placed with precision. Each breath held, they reached the hallway door. James's hand closed around the handle. He turned it slowly, slowly, feeling each tiny click of the mechanism like an explosion in his ears. The door opened. The hallway was empty. The guard was still in the bedroom, muttering into his radio about finding nothing unusual. They were out. Moving quickly now, no longer bothering with silence, just speed. Down the corridor. Past the portraits and the silence and the weight of what they'd just done. The service elevator was still on their floor. They slipped inside, and James punched the button for the ground level. As the doors closed, he saw the bedroom guard emerge from the guest suite, looking puzzled. Had he seen them? James couldn't tell. The elevator descended. Neither of them spoke. Sophie was shaking now, the adrenaline catching up with her. "That was too close," she whispered. "That was insane," James corrected. "We were nearly caught. And Chen's suspicious. He'll review the camera footage. He'll see the timing gaps. He'll figure it out. Then we don't do it again. Can't do it again." James ran a hand through his hair. "Sophie, this was a one-time thing. A stupid, reckless, career-ending thing. We got lucky. We won't get lucky twice." The elevator reached the ground floor. The doors opened onto a service corridor James knew well. Empty at this hour, safe. They stepped out, and Sophie turned to face him. She needs those supplies. She needs to know someone's looking out for her. If we don't stop now, we'll be discovered. And then we can't help anyone because we'll both be removed from the palace. James kept his voice low, but firm. "I'm sorry. I truly am. But this is over." Sophie's eyes filled with tears. Not for herself, James realized. For Kate, for the woman trapped in golden isolation, being slowly erased by someone who should have been family. "I understand," Sophie said quietly, "and I'm grateful. For tonight, for your kindness, I won't forget it." She walked away down the corridor, her footsteps echoing softly. James watched her go, feeling something heavy settle in his chest. He'd done the right thing. He was certain of that. But walking away now, leaving Kate to face whatever came next alone, felt like the worst kind of cowardice. James returned to his post, filed his security report for the evening routine patrol. Nothing unusual, and tried to sleep when his shift ended at 6 a.m. He couldn't. He kept seeing Kate's face. The thinness of her wrists. The desperate gratitude in her eyes when she saw those letters from her children. The casual cruelty of keeping a mother from her kids' words of love. By the time his next shift rolled around that evening, James had convinced himself it was over. Sophie would find another way, or she wouldn't. Either way, he'd done what he could without destroying his life. Then he saw the memo. It was posted in the security office, marked urgent. New protocols for the family floor. All access points now required biometric verification. All delivery personnel to be accompanied by senior staff. All unusual activity to be reported immediately to the Queen Consort's private secretary. Someone knew. Maybe not about him specifically, maybe not about Sophie. But someone knew that Kate was getting help from outside her controlled environment, and they were shutting it down. James crumpled the memo in his fist. This wasn't just about one woman's recovery anymore. This was about power. About who controlled the narrative, the image, the very life of the future queen. He found Sophie 2 days later in the palace gardens. She was cutting roses, her face carefully neutral, but he could see the tension in her shoulders. "The new protocols," he said quietly, pretending to inspect a nearby hedge while tourists snapped photos in the distance. "I saw them." Sophie's hands moved mechanically, snipping stems. "It's over. I can't get to her anymore. There has to be another way." "There isn't." She finally looked at him. "Camilla's won. Kate's completely isolated now. William's been told the new security is for Kate's protection while she recovers. He doesn't question it because he trusts the palace to care for his wife. So we tell him the truth, and say what? That his stepmother is psychologically tormenting his wife? Based on what evidence? Some supplements and letters?" Sophie's laugh was bitter. "He'll think we're paranoid. Or worse, that we're trying to cause problems for Camilla when she's just trying to help." James wanted to argue, but she was right. They had no proof. No evidence that would convince anyone who didn't already see what was happening. "Kate must be terrified," he said. "Kate is surviving, like she always does. But she shouldn't have to just survive. Not in her own home. Not from her own family." They stood in silence, the weight of their failure pressing down on both of them. Then Sophie's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her entire body went rigid. "What is it?" She showed him the screen. A text message from an unknown number. 8 words that changed everything. The housekeeper was fired this morning. Kate's alone. Housekeeper's firing was swift and brutal. No warning. No explanation given beyond restructuring of household staff. The woman had worked in the palace for 17 years. She'd been escorted out the same morning, her belongings in a cardboard box, her face carefully blank. But James knew, and Sophie knew. The housekeeper had been Kate's last connection to the outside world. Her last ally in a building full of people following orders. "We need to get word to William," Sophie said that night. They were meeting in a cafe 3 blocks from the palace, somewhere they wouldn't be recognized, wouldn't be overheard. "He won't believe us without proof. Then we get proof." Sophie's jaw was set. "We document what's happening. We find other staff members who've noticed. We build a case. It could take weeks, months, and Kate doesn't have that kind of time." James had done research after his shift. He'd talked quietly with other guards, nurses, staff who'd worked near the princess's apartments. The picture they painted was disturbing. Kate's prescribed medications had been changed without her doctor's input. Her physical therapy sessions had been reduced. Her children's visits were now supervised and limited to 30 minutes, twice a week. Even her phone access was restricted, all calls monitored, all messages screened. "She's being erased," one of the nurses had whispered. "Slowly, carefully, by the time anyone notices. She'll be so diminished that she'll never recover her former position." It was psychological warfare dressed up as medical care. "There's someone else we could talk to," James said slowly. "Someone who might actually be able to help." Sophie looked up sharply. "Who?" "Princess Anne, the Queen's daughter. Known for her no-nonsense approach and fierce independence. Someone who'd never been intimidated by Camilla and had little patience for palace politics." "Anne's in Scotland," Sophie said. "She won't be back for 2 weeks. Then we wait 2 weeks. Kate might not have 2 weeks." James's phone buzzed. A message from another guard, one he'd quietly recruited to keep watch on Kate's floor. The message was brief and chilling. "Princess seen crying in window. Looked distressed. Curtains closed immediately by staff member." He showed it to Sophie. Her hand covered her mouth. "We can't wait," she said. "We need to do something now." "But what?" The new security protocols made sneaking in impossible. Kate was being watched constantly. Her staff were all Camilla's people now, loyal to the Queen Consort's vision of how the princess's recovery should proceed. Then James remembered something. A conversation he'd overheard months ago, before any of this had started. 2 of the older guards talking about the palace's history, about the network of old service tunnels that ran beneath the building, connecting different wings, different eras of construction. "The tunnels?" he said suddenly. "The old servant passages from when the palace was first built." Sophie's eyes widened. "Are they still accessible?" "Some of them. Most have been sealed off or converted to modern utilities. But I remember seeing a map in the security archive." "Let me check." It took James 3 days to find the map. It was old, hand-drawn in the 1920s, detailing a network of corridors that allowed servants to move through the palace without being seen by the royal family. A different era's solution to the same problem, keeping the machinery of palace, life invisible. Most of the passages were gone now, but one route remained. From the old wine cellar, unused since the 1970s, up through a forgotten stairwell, merging in what was now a storage room on the family floor. The storage room was 3 doors down from Kate's suite. "It's possible," James told Sophie. They were back in the cafe, the map spread between them under the guise of tourist materials. "Difficult, but possible." "How difficult?" "The wine cellar entrance is locked, but I have access. The tunnel itself hasn't been used in decades. Could be unstable. Could be blocked. Could be monitored by sensors I don't know about." He paused. "Could get us both arrested, or it could work." "Gosh, it's a huge risk, Sophie. Bigger than the risk Kate's taking every day just by existing in that place." Sophie's voice was fierce. "She's being systematically isolated and controlled. Her health is being manipulated. Her relationship with her children is being damaged. Someone has to help her." James looked at the map. At the thin line marking a passage that might not even exist anymore. At the possibility of reaching Kate, of giving her back some small piece of agency in her own life, when he asked, "Tomorrow night," before they change any more security protocols, before they find another way to lock her down even tighter. The next evening, James went through his normal patrol routine. He checked in at the security office, reviewed the day's reports, made small talk with the other guards. Normal, routine, nothing to attract attention. At 11:30, he made his way to the lower levels. The wine cellar was in the oldest part of the palace, down stone steps that had been worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. The air grew colder as he descended, thick with the smell of old stone and earth. Sophie was already there, waiting in the shadows. She'd somehow gotten into the palace grounds, probably through her connections. Her position as a royal family member giving her access that a normal person would never have. "Ready?" James asked. "No, but we're doing this anyway." The wine cellar door groaned as James unlocked it. Inside, racks of dusty bottles lined the walls, relics from state dinners past. At the back of the room, behind a particularly large rack, was a small wooden door. James pulled the rack aside. It moved easier than expected, as if someone had moved it recently. That should have warned him. Should have made him reconsider. But he was committed now. The door opened onto darkness. James clicked on his flashlight. Stone steps led downward, then leveled into a narrow corridor. The walls were brick, old and crumbling in places. The ceiling was low enough that he had to duck. They moved forward carefully. The air was stale and cold. Water dripped somewhere in the distance. The only sound was their footsteps and their breathing. The corridor turned again. James checked the map every few feet, making sure they were going the right way. It would be easy to get lost down here. Easy to wander forever in the darkness beneath the palace. Then they reached the stairs. Steep, narrow, climbing up into blackness. This was it. The route that should emerge on the family floor. James went first, testing each step before putting his full weight on it. The wood creaked but held. Sophie followed close behind, up and up. James counted the steps. 50, 100. The map said there should be a door at the top. A door that opened into the storage room. He reached the top, felt along the wall, found the door. It was locked from the other side. "No," Sophie breathed behind him. "No, no, no." James examined the lock by flashlight. It was old. Simple. The kind of lock he could pick if he had the right tools. Which he did. Every guard carried a basic lock-picking set. For emergencies. For situations exactly like this, though he'd never imagined using it for something so completely unauthorized. He worked quickly, his fingers remembering the training. Click. Click. The lock gave way. The door opened onto a small, cluttered room. Boxes of linens. Cleaning supplies. Exactly what the map had promised. They were in. James checked his watch. They had 15 minutes before the next security patrol on this floor. 15 minutes to reach Kate, deliver whatever Sophie had brought, and get back out without being seen. They moved through the storage room to the door. James cracked it open, peered out. The hallway was empty. Dimly lit. Silent. 3 doors down. They could see Kate's suite from here. But they could also see something else. Something that made James's blood run cold. A camera. Brand new, mounted on the wall, pointing directly at Kate's door. It hadn't been there 3 days ago. James pulled Sophie back into the storage room, his mind racing. The camera meant they were being watched, recorded. Any attempt to reach Kate would be documented, traced back to him within hours. "This was a trap," Sophie whispered, her face pale in the dim light. "They knew. Somehow they knew we'd try something. They're just being thorough." Camilla's paranoid about Kate getting outside support. This could be standard security enhancement. James didn't believe his own words. The camera was too perfectly positioned. Too new. Too deliberate. "We need to leave," he said. Now, before footsteps in the hallway. Multiple people. Moving with purpose, James and Sophie froze. Through the crack in the door, they watched as 3 figures approached Kate's suite. James recognized one of them immediately. Camilla herself. The queen consort, dressed immaculately, even at this late hour, her face set in hard lines. Behind her were two of her personal staff members. Camilla didn't knock. She used a key she shouldn't have had and entered Kate's private apartment as if she owned it. The door closed behind them. "We have to go," James urged. But Sophie wasn't moving. She was staring at that closed door with an expression of pure fury. She just walked into Kate's home. Without permission, without announcement. Like Kate is a prisoner, not a princess.
Ow.
"Sophie, we can't. We can listen." Sophie pointed to the wall. "This storage room shares a wall with Kate's sitting room. If we're quiet, we might hear what's being said." It was reckless. It was dangerous. It was also the only way to know what was really happening. They pressed their ears to the wall. The old building's thin walls carried sound well. Voices filtered through, muffled but audible. Camilla's voice first, cold, controlled. "I've been reviewing your progress reports. Your doctors tell me you're not engaging with your physical therapy as recommended." Pause. Then Kate's voice, quieter, strained. "I'm doing what I can. I'm tired. The medications make me. The medications are necessary for your recovery, but I never agreed to. Your agreement isn't required. You're clearly not in a position to make medical decisions for yourself. That's why we've established this care protocol. For your own good." James felt Sophie tense beside him. This wasn't medical care. This was control, masquerading as concern. "I want to see my children," Kate said. Her voice was stronger now. "Not for 30 minutes twice a week. I want proper time with them. They need their mother. They need their mother healthy, stable, not emotional and overwhelmed. The limited visits are protecting them as much as you. It's not your decision to make. Actually, it is." Camilla's voice dropped, became almost gentle, more dangerous for its softness. "You seem to forget your position, Catherine. You married into this family. You serve this family. And right now, you serve by recovering quietly, without drama, without causing problems for the rest of us. I've never caused problems. I've done everything asked of me, have you? Then why did I find out that someone has been smuggling unauthorized items into your apartment? Supplements not approved by your doctors. Letters that should have gone through proper channels. Someone is interfering with your care protocol." Silence. James could almost feel Kate's fear through the wall. "I don't know what you're talking about," Kate said finally. "Don't lie to me." The gentleness was gone from Camilla's voice now. "I've secured this floor. New cameras. New protocols. Whoever was helping you, they can't reach you anymore. You're alone, Catherine. Completely alone. And you'll stay that way until you learn that your recovery happens on my terms. William trusts me to ensure you're properly cared for. He's grateful for my involvement, actually. Relieved to have someone experienced managing this situation while he deals with his father's health. Charles would never approve of this. Charles is dying." The words were brutal in their simplicity. "And when he's gone, William will be king. And you'll be queen consort. But only if you prove you can handle the position. Only if you demonstrate the right kind of strength. The kind that comes from understanding your place in the hierarchy." James heard movement. Kate's voice came again, shaking now. "You're not doing this to help me. You're punishing me. For being more popular? For having what you never could have." Slap was audible, even through the wall. Sophie gasped. James grabbed her arm, holding her back from bursting through the door. "You will speak to me with respect," Camilla said, her voice tight with rage. "I am the queen consort. You are nothing without the title you married into. Remember that." Footsteps. The sound of the door opening. Camilla's voice again, addressing her staff. "Increase her medication dosage. I want her calmer, more compliant, and find out who's been helping her. I want names." Then they were gone. The door closed. Silence fell over Kate's apartment. James and Sophie stood in the storage room, stunned. They'd just heard a member of the royal family physically strike another. They'd heard threats, manipulation, abuse, dressed up in concern. "I have to tell someone," Sophie whispered. This is beyond family politics. This is our word against the Queen consorts, James finished. No one will believe us. We have no proof. We have what we heard. Hearsay. And we heard it while trespassing in a restricted area using secret tunnels. Our credibility is zero. Sophie's hands were shaking. So we do nothing? We let her continue to abuse Kate? We find another way. A smarter way. But James didn't know what that way was. They were out of options. Out of allies. Out of time. Then Kate's door opened. Just a crack. Her voice came through, barely above a whisper. I know you're there. I could hear you in the storage room. The walls are thinner than you think. James and Sophie exchanged glances. They'd been caught. But Kate's tone wasn't accusatory. It was something else. Desperate. Please, Kate continued. I need help. Real help. Not supplements or letters. I need someone to see what's really happening here. Before it's too late. Sophie moved to the storage room door, cracked it open. Kate was standing in her doorway, her cheek red from Camilla's slap, her eyes bright with unshed tears. We tried, Sophie said quietly. The cameras, the security. We can't get to you anymore. It's another way. Kate glanced down the hallway, making sure it was empty. Camilla's secretary keeps records. Everything. Every medication change. Every visitor restriction. Every conversation. She documents it all, supposedly for my medical file. But it's really to protect Camilla if anyone ever questions her methods. Where are these records? James asked. In Camilla's private office, 3rd floor, West Wing. The secretary updates them every night before she leaves. That office is locked, alarmed. There's no way to access it without being caught. Kate's smile was grim. There's a way. If you're willing to take the risk, tomorrow night there's a state dinner. Camilla will be occupied for hours. The secretary always leaves early on dinner nights. You'd have a window. A small one. To break into the Queen Consort's private office and steal confidential documents. James said it out loud, making sure they all understood the magnitude of what Kate was suggesting. To find evidence of what she's doing to me. Evidence that even William can't ignore. Sophie looked at James. With or without you. But I'd rather not do it alone. James thought about his career, his pension, the life he'd carefully built over 6 years of loyal service. He thought about the rules he'd already broken, the lines he'd already crossed. Then he thought about Kate's face when she'd seen those letters from her children, about a woman being slowly destroyed by someone who should have been family. William turned to James and Sophie. I need to see Kate, now, and I need you both there. You're the only ones who know the full truth of what happened. They moved through the palace, William leading now, his stride purposeful and fierce. The state dinner was still going on below. The orchestra still played. The guests still mingled, unaware that the very structure of the royal family had just shifted. Kate's door was locked. William didn't bother with keys. He pounded on it until a startled nurse opened it. Your Royal Highness, the princess is sleeping. Wake her up. William pushed past the nurse into Kate's bedroom. She was sitting up in bed, her face confused and frightened. William? What's happening? He crossed to her, fell to his knees beside the bed, and took her hands in his. I'm so sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry. I didn't know. I didn't see. I trusted the wrong people, and you paid the price. Kate's eyes filled with tears. You know, about Camilla? Everything. Sophie and James found the evidence. All of it. What she did to you, it's over. It's all over. Kate looked past William to where Sophie and James stood in the doorway. Her expression was complex, gratitude, relief, disbelief that this nightmare was finally ending. You came back, she said to Sophie. Even after the cameras, the new security, you came back. Someone had to fight for you, Sophie said simply. You'd do the same for anyone. William stood, turned to James. You're a royal guard. You broke protocol, broke laws, risked your career. Why? James met his eyes steadily. Because I swore an oath to protect the royal family. All of it. including from itself, if necessary. For a long moment, William studied him. Then he extended his hand. "Thank you. For having the courage I should have had. For seeing what I was blind to." James shook his hand, still hardly believing this was real. The next few hours were a blur. Doctors were called Kate's real doctors, the ones Camilla had excluded. Medications were reviewed and changed. The restrictions were lifted. Kate's children were brought to her room, confused about why they were being woken so late, but delighted to see their mother. James watched Kate hug her kids, watched her cry into their hair, watched the life slowly return to her eyes. Sophie found him in the hallway later. "We did it," she said quietly. "We actually did it. We almost got arrested doing it. But we didn't. And Kate's free. That's what matters." James leaned against the wall, exhaustion hitting him. What happens now? Now the palace spins this. Camilla will quietly retire for health reasons. Kate will make a triumphant recovery. The public will never know how close she came to being completely destroyed. And you and I will go back to being invisible. You're not invisible, Sophie. You're a hero. You both are. The kind of heroes who will never get credit for what we did. But that's okay. We didn't do it for credit. William appeared at the end of the hallway. He walked toward them, his expression serious. "I've spoken with the head of security," he said. "James, your actions were unauthorized and technically illegal. However, given the circumstances and the outcome, there will be no disciplinary action. In fact, I'd like you to head Kate's personal security detail from now on. Someone we can trust absolutely." James felt his throat tighten. "Your Highness, I don't know what to say." "Say yes." "Yes, of course." "Thank you." William turned to Sophie. "And you. You risked your position in this family to help Kate. I won't forget that. Neither will she. You'll always have our support. Always." Sophie just nodded, emotion preventing words. William looked at both of them for a long moment. "What you did tonight, what you've been doing for weeks, it showed me something. The palace needs more people who care about what's right, not just what's protocol. More people who'll stand up when things are wrong, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." He walked back toward Kate's room, leaving James and Sophie in the hallway. "Did that just happen?" James asked. "I think it did." They stood in silence, processing everything. The fear, the risk, the impossible victory. From Kate's room came the sound of children's laughter. Real, genuine joy after weeks of controlled, limited visits. "Worth it," Sophie said. "Definitely worth it," James agreed. The story would never be told publicly. The photos they'd taken would be secured, hidden. Insurance against any future attempts to control or isolate Kate. Camilla would fade from Palace's life. Her influence ended, her cruelty exposed to those who mattered. And Kate would recover. Really recover. Surrounded by people who loved her, protected by those who'd proven they'd fight for her, free from the woman who'd tried to break her spirit. Sometimes the most important victories happen in secret. Sometimes heroism means risking everything for someone who can't thank you publicly. Sometimes doing the right thing means breaking every rule you've ever followed. James had joined the Royal Guard to serve. He'd never imagined that service would mean standing against the very institution he was supposed to protect. But he'd learned something important. The palace wasn't the building. It wasn't the protocols or the hierarchy or the carefully maintained image. The palace was the people inside it. The real people with real pain and real courage. And some of those people were worth any risk, any sacrifice, any consequence. Sophie touched his arm gently. "Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be interesting." "Tomorrow's going to be normal," James corrected. "That's the whole point. Kate gets to have a normal tomorrow." Finally, walked back to his quarters as dawn began to break over London. The palace was waking up, preparing for another day of carefully orchestrated perfection. But James knew the truth that lay beneath the surface. Knew that sometimes the most perfect thing you could do was break all the rules for someone who desperately needed saving. And he'd do it again in a heartbeat.